in your readout, when you say the president made clear that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza will be determined by our assessment of Israel's immediate action, could you decode that for us? What exactly is the warning that's being issued here?
I think it's very clear in the language itself, Nancy. We're looking for concrete steps to alleviate humanitarian suffering in Gaza. Again, I won't get ahead of what the Israelis will or won't say or announce. We're looking for concrete steps to be announced here soon. And it's not just about the announcement of concrete steps and changes in their policies, but it's the execution of those announcements and those decisions and implementing them. And so we obviously will watch closely and monitor how they do on the commitments that they make. And as I said earlier, if there's no changes to their policy and their approaches, then there's going to have to be changes to ours.
I think what the world wants to understand is the White House warning that it may remove military aid? What exactly is the threat here?
I think I've stated it pretty clearly, and I'm not gonna, as I said earlier, I'm not gonna preview steps. I'm not gonna preview decisions that haven't been made yet. But there are things that need to be done.
Here's my issue. This is so stupid. This is John Kirby, who is answering questions about this call that just took place a little bit earlier this afternoon between Biden and Netanyahu, in which Biden has apparently called for an immediate ceasefire and said that there has to be some conditions in which they would still continue to support Israel's response. The AP put it that Biden told Netanyahu that future U.S. support for war depends on new steps to protect civilians. What amazes me is the lack of protections for civilians that Hamas has, and that's okay. I mean, the hostages be damned, and they include American hostages as well. And the idea also that Netanyahu has to be the one to offer forth a ceasefire. This is after, over the past 6+ months, Hamas has refused a ceasefire and has also refused to release any hostages. So why is the onus on Israel to make this offer and Israel to implement anything when it's Hamas that has rejected ceasefire offers and they've outright refused to release any hostages? Oh, unless you release all of the Gazan terrorists who were arrested either trying to bomb, stab, or otherwise maim or kill innocent Israelis simply because they're Jewish and they are their neighbor to the north. That's what's so idiotic about this. Because if Hamas released the hostages and stopped bombing Israel tomorrow, Israel's response would cease tomorrow. But if Israel's the only entity that lays down arms and doesn't do anything, then guess what? Just like the ceasefire that was in place October 6th and the millions of ceasefire agreements that Hamas broke before that, Hamas will break it, and then Israel is left again defenseless and attacked and loses more people. That is what's happened for 20 years. Every ceasefire that has been broken by Hamas, without exception. Every single one. Hamas refuses to acknowledge that entity's right to exist. It is written verbatim in their charter. So why is it that the pressure's on Israel to make good on this? Israel is defending itself. And you know what? If you just think about this, if you had a neighbor who for 20 years attacked you, bombed you, sent rockets over, sent suicide bombers over, sent vehicles over to blow up near city centers, if they dug tunnels onto your property, say you were having a barbecue and they sent a truck over and blew up in your backyard while you were having a barbecue. All of this stuff for 20 years at some point, and then they came in and killed half your family. What would your response be? Especially if they refuse to recognize your right to live there. And especially if your neighbor on video said that there's going to be many more October 7th. You can go to Substack where I have the video up there, link for you to see. And they said they were going to keep doing it. Would you not just utterly destroy them as the only way to keep yourself safe when every other means of diplomacy has failed? Every other bit of diplomacy that they have tried for 20 years has failed because Hamas refuses to honor it. There's a reason why Jordan doesn't want Gazans coming in. There's a reason why Egypt won't allow them to come in. There's a reason why. You know, the Gazans that overwhelmingly voted for Hamas in 2006, who, according to two separate polls, one taken in early March and another from December of last year, showing by Gazan entities, showing overwhelming support still for Hamas. There's a reason why those other countries don't want them. There's a reason, because they can't live in peace with anybody. They refuse to live peacefully with anyone. We have Americans who have been now for 6 months held hostage by Hamas. Did Biden think to bring that up at all during the call? I haven't heard him make a statement about it otherwise. Do you? I mean, the all of this, the entirety of this was caused by Hamas. You can't, there's no way, this is not a serious part. You know what this means? It means that Biden bent a knee to Hamas. That's what they mean. You have Blinken here. I've got this audio as well. Let me see if we can. We have Secretary Blinken, who had said that President Biden spoke a short while ago with Netanyahu. They discussed the situation in Gaza. And he had also said that there is no more important step or no more important priority in Gaza than protecting civilians, is what he had said. I'm going to put this in Slack because this is all coming out now with response to this is about like a minute 20. But he said that the president emphasized the strikes on humanitarian workers, etc. Okay, well, what about the Americans in Gaza? What about the Jewish people that are fighting for survival and to defend themselves? This administration just bent the knee to Hamas, just like they bent the knee to the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's exactly what they just did. If we have some of this, we can play it. This is Blinken just about 20 minutes ago.
With Prime Minister Netanyahu. The leaders discussed the situation in Gaza. The president emphasized that the strikes on humanitarian workers and the overall humanitarian situation are unacceptable. He made clear the need for Israel to announce a series of specific, concrete, and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. He made clear that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza will be determined by our assessment of Israel's immediate action on these steps. He underscored as well that an immediate ceasefire is essential to stabilize and improve the humanitarian situation and protect innocent civilians, and he urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to empower his negotiators to conclude a deal without delay to bring the hostages home. The two leaders also discussed public Iranian threats against Israel and the Israeli people. President Biden reaffirmed the United States' strong support for Israel in the face of these threats and our commitment to Israel's security. Right now,
Kane notes, there's no higher priority than the civilians that Hamas. What about the civilians that Hamas uses as human shields? No, like I said, this is Biden. Biden has bent the knee to Hamas, just like he bent the knee to the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's exactly what this is. There is no other way to look at it. It is exactly what it is. And then it's interesting because Kirby was asked, does Biden believe a military victory against Hamas is possible for Israel? And like Kirby really had no answer to it. It was just a bunch of, garble, hamburger, garble. If he had no, and to that point, let me pull this story up because I just saw this. So apparently the IDF now is citing retaliation threats from Iran has canceled all home leave for combat troops. Hamas has no incentive to cooperate. They have no incentive to release hostages. They don't have any incentive to do anything because they know that the left in the United States and their leftist allies elsewhere are going to go to bat for them. And this is actually the administration backing an Iranian proxy. That's exactly what this is. This was Kirby who was asked this just a little bit ago. He's asked if Biden believes a military victory against Hamas is possible for Israel, who, as you know, now canceled all home leave for combat troops. Listen to Kirby's weird response here.
At this point in the conflict, does President Biden believe that a military victory against Hamas is possible for Israel?
Obviously, that's going to be up to the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government to determine. As I've said many, many times, it's difficult to eliminate an ideology with military means, but you can absolutely, through military means, decapitate their leadership, dry up their resources, eliminate their infrastructure, their ability to operate.
It's not just an ideology, it's an elected government. It is the elected representative government of Hamas and the de facto government of West Bank. And it would be had the Palestinian Authority not canceled elections in 21 because they feared Fatah being overtaken. So it's not just an ideology. It's a government. It's a government that doesn't recognize one other nation's right to exist. It's a government that apparently is allowed to use human shields, civilians as human shields. But where was this concern for? This is why these people aren't serious. Israel, it's always been Israel's responsibility to protect its own. But I think now there's more so, it's more obvious than ever. They're not even going to get support from the United States now because of this administration, just to merely defend themselves. We are further empowering Iran. Yeah. Oh, and then add this to it as well. So Kirby, just add. Kane just dropped this in. Go ahead and play this. This is about Taiwan. Go ahead and drop this in. All right, hang on a second. This is just asinine. Here we go. It's just all the fun comes at the end of the hour. Look at this.
Reportedly told President Biden during their summit in San Francisco that Beijing plans to reunify Taiwan with mainland China. Did the Chinese leader bring up similar sentiment in their call the other day? And if so, what was President Biden's response?
Certainly Taiwan came up in the context of the call. There's not a single discussion that we don't have with senior leaders in the PRC where we don't talk about Taiwan. Of course it came up. I won't characterize President Xi's comments, but I can tell you that President Biden was very, very clear that nothing's changed about our one China policy. We don't support independence for Taiwan, but we also don't want to see the status quo changed in a unilateral way, and certainly not by force.
Bending the knee to everyone. There isn't a tyrant or a terrorist that Biden won't rush to bend a knee to. Wow. It's getting bumpy, guys.